It was a dark and stormy night in the small town of Millfield. The wind howled through the streets and rain pelted against the windows of the old Victorian house at the end of the block. The house had been abandoned for years, but tonight it seemed to come alive with an eerie presence. As the storm raged on, a young couple named Tom and Sarah found themselves stranded in Millfield after their car broke down on the way to a nearby town. With no other options, they reluctantly sought shelter in the old house at the end of the block. As they entered the house, they were struck by the musty smell and the creaking of the floorboards beneath their feet. They made their way through the house, searching for a dry place to rest their heads for the night. As they explored the house, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Eventually, they found a room with a fireplace and settled in for the night. As they tried to sleep, they heard strange noises coming from within the house. It sounded like footsteps, but when they investigated, they found no one. The night was long and restless, with the couple tossing and turning as the storm raged on outside. But as the night progressed, things started to get even stranger. Tom woke up to find Sarah standing at the foot of their bed, staring blankly at him. When he tried to speak to her, she didn't respond. He reached out to touch her, but her skin was cold and clammy. Suddenly, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving Tom alone in the dark. Panicked, Tom searched the house for Sarah. But as he explored, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The house seemed to be alive, with the walls creaking and the floors groaning beneath his feet. As he continued his search, Tom found himself in a room at the top of the house. The room was filled with old furniture covered in dust and cobwebs. But as Tom looked around, he noticed that there was something different about this room. The air was thick with a strange energy, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood up. Suddenly, he heard a noise coming from behind him. He turned around to see Sarah standing in the doorway, her eyes now filled with a cold, unfeeling stare. "Sarah, what's going on? Are you okay?" Tom asked, his voice trembling. But Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she slowly walked towards Tom, her movements jerky and unnatural. Tom tried to move, but he couldn't. It was as if he was frozen in place. As Sarah got closer, Tom could see that her eyes had turned completely black. And as she reached out to touch him, he felt a coldness spread through his body. Suddenly, Tom was jolted awake by the sound of thunder crashing outside. He sat up, his heart racing as he tried to catch his breath. As he looked around the room, he realized that he was alone. Sarah was nowhere to be found. Panicked, Tom ran through the house, calling out for Sarah. But there was no answer. The house was silent except for the sound of the storm outside. Just as Tom was about to give up, he heard a faint whisper coming from the room at the top of the house. It was Sarah's voice, but it sounded different. Trembling with fear, Tom made his way up the stairs to the top room where he had last seen Sarah. The door was slightly ajar, and as he pushed it open, he was met with a sight that made his blood run cold. Sarah was standing in the center of the room, surrounded by a circle of candles. Her eyes were still black, and her skin had turned a sickly shade of gray. In front of her was an old book, bound in what looked like human skin. Tom tried to move, but he found that he was rooted to the spot. He couldn't tear his eyes away from Sarah, who was now muttering strange incantations under her breath. The room was filled with an eerie glow, and Tom felt a chill run down his spine. He knew that he had to do something, but he couldn't move or speak. Suddenly, Sarah turned towards him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat.
"Tom,"
she said, her voice deep and guttural.
"I have been waiting for you."
Tom could feel a cold sweat forming on his forehead as he tried to make sense of what was happening. He had to snap out of it and get out of there before it was too late. With a burst of adrenaline, Tom broke free from the trance and ran towards the door. But as he reached for the handle, he felt a sharp pain in his back and he stumbled forward. He turned around to see Sarah standing behind him, a twisted smile on her face. In her hand was a knife, and it was covered in blood. Tom's blood. He stumbled backwards, trying to get away from her, but he tripped and fell to the ground. Sarah loomed over him, her eyes now glowing with an otherworldly light.
"Welcome to my world, Tom,"
she said, her voice dripping with malice.
You're never leaving.
Tom screamed as Sarah plunged the knife into his chest. The pain was unbearable, and he felt his life slipping away from him. As he lay there dying, Tom realized that he had stumbled into something far beyond his understanding. The old house at the end of the block was not just a haunted house, but a gateway to something much darker and more sinister. He knew that he was not the first to fall victim to the house's malevolent presence, and he would not be the last. As his vision faded to black, Tom knew that he had become a part of the house's dark history, a warning to anyone foolish enough to enter its walls. The next morning, the storm had passed, and the sun was shining down on Millfield. But the old house at the end of the block remained unchanged, a foreboding presence in the otherwise peaceful town. The police were called to investigate the disappearance of Tom and Sarah, but they found no trace of either of them. The house was empty, and there was no evidence to suggest foul play. But the townspeople knew better. They knew that the old house was cursed, a place of darkness and death, and they knew that they could never truly be safe until it was torn down and forgotten forever. But as the years passed, the house remained standing, a grim reminder of the horrors that lurked within its walls. And on stormy nights, when the wind howled through the streets, the townspeople could swear they heard the ghost. Thank you for watching my dark horror story. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more spine-chilling tales. Also, share the video with everyone you know. I appreciate your support and look forward to bringing you more terrifying content in the future.